That's right. The liabilities are completely unfunded. They're paid.
Okay.
They're paid as you go, as they're incurred. So the liability, even though it's a decrease, it's not like that there's cash sitting there backing those liabilities.
That's the only point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Appreciate the clarification. Thanks.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your report. I would accept a motion on this to receive and file.
I'll move.
Moved by
Public comment.
Pardon me. Yes. If there is anyone wishing to speak to this item, please come forward.
Good evening, Barry Levinson again. There's a couple of things that maybe the consultant could answer these questions, or one or two of these questions. In looking at attachment number 2, I'm reading a third paragraph where they're explaining how they prepared the report. I'll just read it. It's very short. In preparing our report, we relied without audit on information, some oral and some in writing, supplied by the city's staff. And then at the end of the paragraph, it says, if any of this information as summarized in this report is inaccurate or incomplete, the results shown could be materially affected and this report may need to be revised. I'm not surprised that the report is not an audited report. I don't think that's unusual. But I find it a little unusual, and would like to know why, in preparing such a voluminous report, that the city staff couldn't provide the consultant with all written information on that makes up all the assumptions and all the information from the city. I find it troubling that they would accept oral information to base this report. It seems to me it makes it less valuable as a tool going forward, especially since a lot of this is based on assumption and estimates to begin with. But to say it's based on oral information, how does one check who gave the oral information, what was given orally, how much, what percentage? As an auditor, I find that troubling. And to me, it lessens the value of this report. And that's what you want. You want the best report possible. That's what we all want here. I also want to point out that as part of this report, it makes it clear that as of today, no assets, meaning no monies, have been set aside to help pay for this $35.146 million unfunded liability as of next year. As a matter of fact, I had a chuckle. Excuse me, I didn't mean it at anybody's expense, but it did seem funny that it said that in December in the report, in December, City Council authorized the first transfer of $50,000 into the trust fund at the close of fiscal year 2016-17, which means it hasn't been done yet, but they're authorizing a $50,000 transfer. Now, being a numbers guy as I am, I looked at the $50,000, which you haven't yet provided, and divided it into the unfunded liability as of next year, and it came out to 0.0014 or 0.14%. That means once at the end of this fiscal year, come June, when you provide the 50, assuming you do so, and provide the transfer of that $50,000, your unfunded liability will go down from 100% to 99.86%. Bravo. The other thing that I'd like to say is, obviously this is being done because there's a requirement now, GASB 75, that rather than a footprint or a note in a financial statement, which other than geeks like myself would never look at, or maybe some large investors might look at it, but the average person, even if they're looking at a financial statement, are not going to read the footnotes. Now it's part of the balance sheet. It sticks up. Now all of a sudden the liability becomes an issue because people will see it. A lot more people will see it. But my concern is that regardless of how it's reported, why has this council all of you, except for the exception of Mr. Silva, who was just elected, have been on board at least 5 years or close to 5 years, have not addressed this huge unfunded liability. Why have you waited till this end of this year to finally start funding it? And like I said, after you fund it by the $50,000 that you've authorized, you're going to have a 99.86% unfunded liability, which obviously means, how are you going to come up with this money? I would like to know what thoughts you have as to how you're going to make up this tremendous unfunded liability. One last real quick point, just a sentence. One of his assumptions was, he said the next 10 years, he did say that he thought that the rate of increase in medical care will go down. Everything that I've read states that as we get older, the rate of increase is going to go way up. So I didn't understand that at all.
Thanks. I do appreciate your questions, and I think we, among at least 2 or 3 parties here, may be able to answer some of those. Were you interested in doing that, or Ms. Beatty?
Could I address the
Please. Please.
Sure. So, yeah, I just wanted to address the, some in oral and some in writing and what we did. Basically, we go through an extensive process with the city in gathering the data and other information and plan provisions. It's written. It's detailed. We've been done this for about 10 years now. And the reason why we have some oral and some in writing is that with every valuation, when you're going through the process of gathering both the data and verifying the provisions, there's always going to be some sort of clarification. Say, well, can you just clarify this to make sure that we understand exactly how this is working? And so sometimes that does come via a phone call, in which case we document it in our files. So that's kind of the oral part. It's a very small part. And that's, so that's the reason. But I do want to say that it's a very extensive and detailed process that we go through in gathering the data, and as well as all the plan provisions to be valued. And secondly, with regard to the audit, we don't personally audit the data. We're not auditors. We collect the data. We review it for reasonableness. We compare it to the prior year's data, and we reconcile it to make sure that there's no unreasonable or unusual changes. And if we do see them, we have many conversations with city staff about them to make sure that we understand the changes. And finally, the report, because you do have an auditor who audits your financials, that auditor is responsible for auditing our report and our work, so our report will get audited. So the fact that it hasn't been audited yet, it doesn't mean it won't be. It will be before your final financial statements are reported. So I just wanted to address you with that.
Thank you for your response. I had one question involved. What is the annual cost of using the outside consultant for this?
I know it went up this year because we had the new requirements. So
it's about $24,000 for this presentation. That includes all the evaluation and for John to come down for this presentation.
Great, thank you.
And we did add the additional component in this year to do the analysis and to prepare for the reopener on medical insurance, which isn't a continuing cost. We anticipated it as a one-time cost.
It was every 2 years plus every year.
Got it.
Joe Imbriano, based on what you plan on contributing towards this nightmare, we're all going to be dead by the time you actually put a dent in it or finish it off. I don't know what kind of math you guys are capable of calculating, but it's about 70 years worth. I don't know if you pay attention to the news or global events. I don't know if you're familiar with what's going on in Venezuela right now, but the country is in economic collapse. And it's because of the oil prices. Now, that's not what we're dealing with here. The gross domestic product of the city is actually taxation. That's our industry. Well, you know what? When we're out of money and nobody has any money to pay what you overspent, we're going to be rocking the cattle truck looking for a meal like they did in Argentina when their economy collapsed. We're going off a cliff, folks. And it's amazing because all your heads are down when Barry's up here asking questions, talking. And you're all looking at your monitors or acting like, you don't want to be here, and you almost passed this public comment period over. Mr. Whitaker, you know better. You've been at this a long time. This is a very serious problem. It's a huge problem. But when we're up here getting ready to give away raises to get the fire department union vote and the police union vote, everybody's all smiles and you got your hair all done up real nice. And I'm being specific to Miss Fitzgerald because she loves those meetings. The city's broke. It's going broke faster and faster every time I come in here. But yet you give us a little trinket. You know, you'll put up a staircase and have a ribbon cutting, and you'll put up a nice bridge to nowhere and act like you've done us all a favor. And yet this issue hasn't been dealt with for years and years by people that call themselves fiscal conservatives. That's baffling. I have wanted an audit of the city's finances for some time. I really am going to push for it. And I don't think anybody in the city is capable of performing it because I don't think I can trust you. And I make that statement based on your track record, which is one that has, in my opinion, abandoned its fiduciary responsibility. How did we get in this mess? We owe hundreds of millions of dollars of promises. And what do we have in a way of making sure that they're paid? That's a really good question. Is Argentina circa 1983 or Venezuela circa 2016 going to come to Fullerton? Or is it going to come to all of our communities? Because what we've done is we've created a circus. And the ringleaders are the unions, and you're the circus animals. And you get to fool everybody, entertain everybody come election time. And when municipal business comes up for consideration, you get to talk real neat and act like you're on our side. But in reality, you all work behind the scenes synergistically to make sure that the people that put you here get their way so you can come back for a couple more years and maybe go up the ladder a few more rungs and do this at a higher level with more damage to the taxpayer. I'm at a real loss for words as to the level of incompetency that I see with the condition of our infrastructure, with our finances, and with all of the so-called conservative and concerned liberal and this amalgamation of politics in this community. And all we got is a bunch of potholes and a bunch of bills and a bunch of people that don't want to take responsibility. And when it comes time to actually have a discussion about this, we want to act like, well, it's just a receive and file. We don't need to talk about it. And this is just a small portion of the nightmare, because the real nightmare is the pensions. And nobody's changed anything. You keep giving away the farm in a 3-2 vote every time, and you politically engineer as such that 3-2 majority remains in place. I don't want to see Venezuela come to Fullerton. I don't want to end up in a situation where it takes a sack of beans to get a sack of rice, because nobody in Fullerton can grow a sack of rice to get a sack of beans. If our monetary system collapses because of all this kind of behavior, we're all going to be in deep doo-dah, folks. Open your eyes.